For those of you who've been keeping up with the Corsair A500 content, you may have found a few reviews pointing out a few problems. In my review, I found there to be severe issues with the loose mounting bracket, including poorly sized spacers to the backplate, which appeared at the time to be preventing good enough mounting pressure to distribute the thermal paste adequately, which led to bad thermal performance. However, it wasn't the backplate that was causing the problem. A comment from that video brought to attention another level of ridiculousness. The commenter pointed out that they had a couple of samples of this product and noticed that the heat pipes were clashing with the capacitors of the VRM, and they said that they were able to rotate the cooler to avoid the clash. My first thought was, no way. Corsair can't have designed, tested, and manufactured a product that leans on the electrical components of the motherboard. There's just no way. But after removing most of the surrounding components from the motherboard socket to get a good look, my fears and the commenter's points were confirmed. The heat pipes are, as far as we can see, sitting on the surrounding capacitors. It was tricky to get a great angle on this to prove it, and I was about to blame the A500 for causing these little nicks to the capacitors on my motherboard, but it's not actually true, so I'm retracting a comment I didn't make, a retraction in the script, I guess. You can't actually, the heat pipes aren't wide enough to make contact with both of them, so it couldn't have happened. So they were still resting on them, as the images, at least as far as I can present, do show. But let's continue forward and we'll see exactly where this goes. But let's hold fire for a second. Back to director number one. Whose fault is it? Well, after commenting on my Patreon Discord to point out the problem, just for a bit of banter, the sickness asked whether it was the fault of the motherboard's components or the cooler not conforming to the Intel socket specifications, and that's a fair question. After a brief search online, I found an LGA1150 socket guide, not 1151 socket guide, but they're very similar, so much so that you never see a cooler that's compatible with LGA1150 sockets and not compatible with 1151, 1155, and 1156, hence the LGA115X mark. And this 1150 socket guide's plans are for the 1155 and 1156 sockets, so you can see the level of interchangeability. So looking at the socket layout section, note the top of the socket is on the right, it's rotated over clockwise. The area just to the left, which is at the top here, should only contain components lower than 10.10mm, or 10.10mm, including for solder paste. So the next question is, how high are those capacitors? I first checked the code of the capacitor and searched it online. Apparently these 6.3mm wide capacitors come in 7 and 10mm tall variants. 10mm comes very close to the 10.10mm clearance allowed by the Intel spec, so measuring, which I could have done in the first case, yes, but two sources are better than one, actually confirmed the capacitor to be the smaller 7mm tall option. So that pretty much confirms it. Corsair, in their infinite wisdom and experience, managed to design, test, and manufacture a cooler that's compatible with the LGA1151 socket and not meet the specification for that socket, by which I mean design, test, and manufacture a cooler that's incompatible with the LGA1151 socket to a certain degree. Something else that came up in other reviews, and something I didn't consider at all, was the design of the baseplate. I heard this first from the De Bauer review, and in the Patreon Discord, that the lack of a copper baseplate between the heat pipes and the IHS, like on the Mugen 5, causes issues with chiplet-designed CPUs like the AMD CPUs with regards to heat being evenly spread to the heat pipes. Check out his review for more details on that, but that brings me back to the point of socket incompatibility. The additional chunk of copper to the baseplate of a cooler like the Mugen 5, while dissipating heat well to the heat pipes, also raises the heat pipes away from the capacitors beneath to remain compatible with the socket. Anyway, I needed to understand what performance difference this made to the cooler. Like the commenter from the previous video, I rotated the cooler, which meant the heat pipes were well clear of any capacitors, which meant I could test this thing properly. Now, when I say properly, I'm using the word very loosely. Using the top PCI Express socket with the A500 rotated means, or vertical, means you basically say goodbye to any airflow if you have a graphics card. So I went about testing it in a couple of different ways. The first option, which is the sketchiest one, was to remove the graphics card and test with both fans using Prime 95 and Cinebench, but not Hitman, since all testing with other coolers uses the dedicated graphics card, and technically this option completely invalidates the test bench. The second, more reliable option, which I'll be using for comparisons in the future, replaced the graphics card and removed one of the fans to allow for some decent intake area just underneath. I was going to test with the second fan half sticking out to the side, but that's both really sketchy and completely unrealistic for anyone to do. Anyway, the previous testing on the Arctic Freezer 34 Esports Duo confirmed the minor difference between 1 and 2 fan operation, but let's take a look for the A500. Since this is an update video, we'll just hit the main points quickly, go to the full review for more details. The Prime 95 acoustically limited test shows us a proper mount with 1 fan is about 3 degrees Celsius better than a bad mount with 2 fans, and a good mount with 2 fans is about 3 degrees Celsius better than a good mount with 1 fan. But at the same noise level, a different cooler in the form of the Mugen 5 with 1 fan by default is better than the A500 with 1 fan, and just over 1 degree Celsius worse than the A500 with 2 fans. Something that's worth noting before we check out the full speed Prime 95 results is the Mugen 5 is nearly at full speed, whereas the fans on the A500 are sat around about the 50% mark. So going back to the acoustic Prime 95 results and then fading to the full speed results, you can appreciate that even though the fans are spinning nearly twice as fast on the A500 than they were previously, it's only about a 2 to 3 degrees Celsius better result. Enough to basically equal the performance between the single fan A500 and the Mugen 5, while the A500's single fan is spinning nearly twice as fast as the Mugen 5's fan. Changing over to Cinebench, the acoustic test repeats the results of the acoustic Prime 95 results, and the single fan A500 is a good couple of degrees behind the Mugen 5. Not great considering it's about twice the price and a lot taller. This is a great time to once again understand and appreciate how a bad mount can strip away the performance potential of a cooler. The 169mm tall to 120mm fanned A500 sitting on the capacitors is only 2.5 degrees Celsius better off than the 120mm tall single 92mm fan NHD9L, and we can see if the A500 wasn't so interested in riding the capacitors, it would be nearly 5 degrees Celsius more productive. The full speed Cinebench test knocks a degree or so off all of the coolers, but it's not enough to see the much louder A500 overtake the Mugen 5. And finally, Hitman. We say goodbye to the dual fan A500 now, since it wasn't compatible with a top PCI Express graphics card, and I couldn't get it to work when it was rotated over because of the incompatibility with the socket. In the acoustic test, the Mugen 5 edged out over the single fan A500, but this changed with the full speed version, and so it should be considering the change in speed and noise levels for the A500. So with any luck, I can end my coverage of this cooler with this video. So final thoughts on this cooler. It's massive, it's huge, and considering its size, its performance is, I'd say, below average. When you have a cooler, at least testing it with, say, 100 watts of a thermal load for 10 minutes on Prime 95 with the 6700K, slightly overclocked, the Mugen 5 is very, very close to the 2-fan operation of the A500, with this thing at full speed spinning at about 1200 RPM, where this thing is spinning at more like 2300 RPM. So nearly twice as fast on the A500 with 2 fans is not very far off 1 fan spinning, you know, half as fast. So that's pretty much insane from that point of view. Poor value for money in that respect. So, and it costs twice as much, obviously the point of value for money there. It has an interesting sliding mechanism on the fans, but they're 120mm fans for such a damn huge cooler. You could perhaps squeeze in 140s. It's not out of the realm of possibility to go down that road, and it has clear mounting issues with certain sockets, with the LGA115X sockets. If you have a socket that is conforming as tightly as it can to that specification, this could have actually had larger capacitors on it by a few millimeters, which would have meant this would be really buggered, the A500. So on that point, then I think if I were to put, and I don't generally say, do I recommend this? Sometimes I'll be like, do I recommend it on a thing? I'm like, not really. I've never really been one for like, yes, absolutely go and buy this thing. I'd probably say, not worth it. Not worth it. It's too expensive, performance isn't that great, and it's a little bit fiddly, and it's kind of incompatible. Basically what I just said. But one thing I want to add on to this review is there is a culture among some people, or among the community as a whole, but some people, you know, dip into this culture, that a brand will give you some sort of guarantee on performance, quality, what have you. So this A500 is clearly an example of that is not the case. Corsair had been around for donkey's years and produced so many different cooling implements, at least maybe not air coolers for quite a while, but, you know, coolers all in all, and clearly their team didn't have the intricate understanding of the LJ115X socket. Not like I do. I've only just worked out all this stuff by testing it, but did they test them? Did they test the limits? Did they 3D print a model of the socket and all its limitations and apply it to the bottom of their cooler to see if there's any clashes? Kind of doubt it, based on what I'm seeing here. And this isn't just with like Corsair, of course. This is with everything. Noctua, I mean, the only issue they've had is, well, I guess the brown fans, if you call it an issue, but there are so many people that would claim that they couldn't make black fans because I don't even know how to phrase it. It's like the structural integrity of the color black would not work for their fans. Are you kidding me? So that was one great example. Another one, the Inwin 301. I reviewed that. It had bad performance. I said as much. Many other places said it had bad performance. And lo and behold, a lot of people complain and say, no, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. The 301C, again, had snap-off like plastic clips inside. Why? There's grommets been around for ages. They've even used them for donkey's years as well. Yet for some reason they think, let's break things off permanently so you can't replace it, and that's a good idea. And a lot of people just stick behind companies just because they're a company that they recognize or they've bought from for years. But believe it or not, companies can screw up from time to time, and I believe this is one case. Now, on top of that, extending the video a little longer, you can leave if you don't want to see any more coverage of the A500, but this might be a little bit of fun or a little bit of a heartbreak, depending on your point of view. And for me, it is a bit of both. So after I finished my review of the A500, I watched a couple of other videos from other places to see how people fared with theirs. I make a rule of not generally watching any content while I'm reviewing a product because it can play with your mind, and other people who you perhaps respect or not will have certain opinions or not, and then that can skew your judgment, or my judgment in this case. So, after the review I watched the DeBauer review just to see what he thought, because it looked like he had some, based on the thumbnail, good thumbnail I guess, had some sort of mounting or base plate issues. I wanted to see what was going on there, hence my coverage or my mention of it earlier on in the video. And I also watched JayzTwoCents coverage when the thing came out and everyone just floods, I guess it was an embargo or something, everyone floods their reviews or their videos of the cooler onto YouTube. And I don't generally watch a lot of JayzTwoCents content, but this time I did, because it was about this and I was interested in to see what kind of opinions he had. And just before I move on, what I'm about to do isn't out of malice, it's not out of any ill will. I'm just doing this to help or try and improve things for everyone. I've been watching Jay for absolutely years, and I got into water cooling because of him, and his content has been extremely useful for me over the years. But with that said, sometimes things can go wrong in certain areas, and they need to be realigned, calibrated, and readjusted from time to time. That's all I'm going to say on that. Now, when I watched the video first time round, I was like, okay, he's had some sort of mounting issue, and it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue. He did also rotate it, which fixed it, so maybe did he have the same problem? And he didn't really discuss any more of it. He sort of put it down to the RAM. He wasn't sure or was. And then at the end, he's sort of just like, well, do you trust him? Which is one of the shittiest responses or opinions I think you could have on that. Do you trust them? No. Give us the results and we will judge them for ourselves. So what I'm going to do quickly is just throw in a little bit of a cut of everything there. I've not tried to, and if I did, I apologize. I've not tried to make it look like it negatively in his light, but there were just some comments which I have issues with. And also, his following video, when I saw it, made me completely re-question the first video, and we'll get onto that now. So I'm just going to play some clips, add a little bit of my thoughts in between them, and then end it on the bombshell, and we'll go from there. So headphones on, just to start off, a bit of context. He's mounted the cooler and didn't seem to have issues, and now he's discussing the RAM situation he's got, or he's sort of assessing during the time when he's putting RAM back in after he's installed it.
They can be when it comes to your RAM. Now my question right now is going to be, the way that this RAM pushing on the cooler slightly, is that going to cause me any sort of cooling issue if it's lifting the cooler a little bit. I don't think that'll be a problem. It's really not like, it's not lifting it really.
So he's assessed it and he's checked out whether it's going to be lifting or not, or causing an issue, and he's judged based on the installation and having a close-up look with everything out of the way that it's not actually causing any issue there. Now, what I'm not going to do, and we've got to remain quite open and honest about this, is if he changes his mind later, that's fair enough, because sometimes when you see something afterwards, you're like, that's a big problem. But well, anyway, we'll carry on.
One of the stress tests we like to do around here is Cinebench R20 on a 10-minute loop. But we're looking at here, whoa, I don't think it's making good contact. I think maybe that memory might be lifting it a little bit.
So he's assessed the performance of a test he knows well, and he's clearly noticed something has gone wrong. Now, I did see in the comments people saying, oh, on the first test it was this wattage and that wattage. Now, I'm not going to say I know the answer, but I've noticed that depending on the thermal out, or depending on the temperature of the CPU, it can affect the wattage of what's being pushed out of the CPU. So the higher the temperatures go, the higher the wattage goes generally. But not my wheelhouse, really. I don't know all the technical details, and most people don't. My assumption is. Anyway.
So let's go ahead and rotate it. I mean, it made contact, but it's not great.
So he's clearly assessed that rotating it might help due to the RAM situation, and he has made a comment saying that there has been good thermal contact, but it's not great. It's okay, I think is what he said there. So yeah, there's still room for issues to be raised.
Now you know why they provide that thermal paste. So it's still going to be a legit test because it's their thermal compound.
So this is one potential issue I have, and it's something that I try and avoid, is using the thermal paste that the cooler provider gives you for assessing whether a cooler is good or not. You're adding more variables in, and it's just an issue. Fair tests, generally you change one thing and that's it. If you change, I mean, you could argue change the entire cooling solution from the CPU, IHS and above, which is fair, which is what he's doing to a certain degree, but he's also saying it's a legitimate test and that sort of stuff. He's not comparing this with anything else, so what's the test? It's just, let's see a result. Who knows? Who knows if that's any good or not?
I think it's pretty obvious that this cooler definitely is going to rank up there, and we need more user feedback. We need more people to buy it, obviously, and report on their experiences.
Now, that heavy breath at the start, it strikes me as, I've got to say something here that's going to help me with other people, and you'll work that out later on. He's saying that more people need to buy this to understand more about it. No, that's the job of us as reviewers. Jay as a reviewer, at least when I'm reviewing something, I should be giving you the answers, not saying, hey, you go figure it out and make your own mind up. If that was the case, then what's the point in the review? What is the point in this video if it's just saying do it yourself? You know, and also the little comment at the end was more people need to buy it. Why? Joins to the first point of that little snippet. Why?
Let's talk about some final thoughts. One, I think it's going to rank up there, no problem, with the Noctuas and the Be Quiets and all that sort of stuff.
I really don't like that comment there. Final thoughts. I think it's going to rank up there with the, why are you thinking? Just go and test them. Why is there this ambiguity? It just blows my mind. He mentions later in the video that, we have got lots of RAM so we can swap it out, but you know, not everyone has that. I'm pretty sure you've got a Noctua NHD15 back there that you can probably swap out and do some, you know, really general testing along with the really general testing we have here to get an idea. But, you know, I think this is going to be like that, you know.
The issue we had with the RAM, this is not Corsair's fault. It's this particular non-traditional layout of this motherboard. So that's this particular non-traditional motherboard layout that caused that. If you're running this motherboard, low profile memory or standard height profile memory is what you're going to need.
Now, I really don't like that as an answer. It's, if you have this board, you'll need to go low profile RAM. Okay. Why do you have that board? Why is it on your test bench? Why have you got a board on your test bench as your part of your test system, which is not like most boards around? Why not have one that is like most boards around? It can be a really high grade, but one that at least has a layout and is physically like most boards around. Yes, I have an ITX test bench here, but the socket does appear to be compatible and compliant, and it's a relatively average or normal layout of the components. There's no weird RAM position or M.2 slots in the way, that sort of thing. So yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good answer for somebody reviewing and testing this to be like, well, it's unlike most things around. So,
But the actual adjustment of the fans themselves, if this was a traditional layout, we could have easily just would have fit right there, no problem whatsoever.
He mentions this now, that the adjustment of the fans is, you know, you can just raise it and it'll be absolutely fine. He completely fails to mention that if you raise the huge, then he hasn't mentioned the size of this cooler, by the way. If you raise the huge cooler's fans even higher, you can fit the RAM in. Great, but he hasn't mentioned that you might not be able to fit it in your case. You know, you can see how big the cooler is compared to the GPU. Maybe there might be an issue with the case. Maybe.
So it definitely has some steep competition, well-established competition in air coolers in the industry that people have just been completely trusted. You know, people put their trust in Noctua. People put their trust in Darkrock. They've been around. People know they perform just as good as many AIOs. So really, it's going to come down to whether or not you are going to trust Corsair.
No. Nobody should. Just absolutely not. No. People look at reviews and results from places like Gamers Nexus, Linus Tech Tips, JayzTwoCents, and see the spread of results and go, oh, well, I'm going to pick that one because it, at least for me, it's the cheapest or the best bang for buck or has the best performance. They don't just say, I trust Corsair as a brand, therefore I will just give them my money and just hope it's okay. There's no level of trust here, apart from, I guess, trusting the reviewer, which is questionable at this point. For this one, I know I'm being a bit harsh, but I think sometimes, you know, tough love, you got to be good to be good to be. I don't think that's... but anyway, no. So, yeah, trust doesn't come into it. It should never come into it. It should be based on facts, results, performance, the truth.
So I think we need to have a lot more user feedback on what it's been like for them.
Yeah, go buy it. Buy this and then tell me how it went for you. I'm the reviewer, but buy this and tell me how it went for you. I don't like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of your answer being someone, well, let's just see how the comments fill up with people who have bought this cooler and whether it's good or not. It's like, no. We don't want people buying loads of stuff. They're supposed to watch reviews, work out what it's like, then buy it based on that stuff. That's how it should work. So then people aren't getting ripped off. They're not giving money to someone for something bad and then saying, it was bad. It's already happened then. And then what, the next cooler comes out and we have to do the same thing? Oh, it's a different one now. So buy it and tell us how it went. No. See how it is and then go and buy it. That's how it should always be.
I don't see this going bad. I don't see it, you know, not working out for people.
He doesn't see it working out for people. It didn't work out for him first time round, so clearly he could see that not working out for people, such as people in a situation which have high RAM, the board he has, and rotating in that particular way. So yes, if it can go bad for him, there's probably other cases where it could go bad. The room for a possibility is quite high, or probability. Words. So yeah, there's always the chance of it going bad, and I think that statement is very flawed.
I think the biggest complaint here is the gray fan for me personally. I think if these were black, it would just look perfect. The gray is going to clash with a lot of things.
The biggest complaint, I think there were bigger ones and more important ones. But this, what I'm about to show you, it encapsulates my issue with what I've just seen. You see how you feel. First little bit is sped up of the intro bit, and then it comes into it. This is the next video he made, right after this one.
Drop your temperatures and get maximum performance from your processor with Corsair's new A500 air cooler.
An advert for the A500. I would put money on it that he knew that Corsair were buying a sponsor spot or an advertising spot on his channel before he made the first video. So I'm not going to say that what he did was intentional and the ways that things came around and materialized was intentional.
I think it's pretty obvious that this cooler definitely is going to rank up there, and we need more user feedback. We need more people to buy it, obviously, and report on their experiences. So I think we need to have a lot more user feedback on what it's been like for them.
But what I'm saying is it leaves so much room for that to be potential, or to be possible, or to be likely, to a certain degree, that it makes you question things. It makes you question the legitimacy of the coverage. Saying we'll have to wait for more people to buy it. just buy it and tell me how you think it is. You know, well, this is a weird board, so I don't know, you know. No. If you put a standard or more standard board at least on, then you can answer more questions more thoroughly. If you use other coolers which you mention, instead of saying we just trust them, and you test other coolers and compare them together and say, look, it does perform like this. Not that people just trust them, therefore should we just trust Corsair? No, that's not a good answer as a reviewer. Yes, you want to get content out quickly, but it just means that you look untrustworthy, and that's not really fair. I sort of found this a bit amusing too.
Always half-assed everything.
Now, I don't think JayzTwoCents half-ass everything. I think, on the whole, he's a good guy. And I think he's a good guy here, maybe. But, like I said, there's so much room to maneuver, you could assume or presume otherwise, which is the problem. There's no, like, hashtag ad, there's no that sort of stuff going on with the video, with the little bit of the skit going on the start. There's just, it just seems like it's not transparent enough for us to be able to say definitively, this is what happened, or is what is happening. So, yeah. What I would like to see, if Jay ever saw this video, I doubt it. I doubt it would make it to him. He's a busy guy. But I would like to see a follow-up video mounting it to a more standard board, doing the testing, and comparing them properly and saying, look, these are the facts. It's up to you guys to make your own decision. So yeah, I've laid the facts down. Work out whether you like it or not yourself. Based on this, don't normally say this that much. Probably wouldn't recommend it, based on a lot of the crap that's come up with this thing and its performance not being all that great and it being really freaking expensive. But anyway, so thanks guys. Sorry for the huge end of the video. I didn't want it to go on that long, but I just felt I had to get this kind of thing out. Watch multiple sources, check out what everyone thinks, then work out what you're going to get. Yes, it's a long way of doing it, and in all likely, if you just bought what you wanted, you probably wouldn't go far wrong from, you know, getting something similar to what you wanted anyway. But anyway, yeah, it's a long way of doing it, but if you want to do the whole buying something right and the review process correctly and that sort of stuff, you would watch lots of reviews and find out what things are from many sources, and you can tell where the truth is yourself. So, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.